Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Sejauh ini tutup situ. Nanti orang tak masuk.
Professor Anis, brothers and sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We have invited Professor Anis to give a special lecture. Inshallah, if he has the time, he can come again for additional lectures later on. But before I introduce the speaker, let me say a little bit about the subject that he will discuss today. The need for a lecture or series of talks on the Islamic approach to management has been felt for a long time, because as always we are influenced by Western models of behavior, culture, of organization, and indeed of management. What we want is to have a more comprehensive approach which we believe resides in Islam. But for this purpose, there are not many experts in the field. Even Islamic scholars, scholars of the Islamic religion who profess to be Muslims, do not necessarily know Islamic management. So we have to seek people like Professor Anis, who may be a specialist in other fields. In fact, I know that he is a specialist in comparative religion. But that forms a strong basis for him to talk about Islamic management, because I'm sure he knows a lot about the Christian way of doing things. And indeed, there is a famous theory by a German sociologist, Max Weber, who talks about the Protestant ethic that gave rise to modern capitalism and modern industrialization. So these are connections that cannot be denied, and they exist whether we agree with the assumptions or not. So what we are going through today in MEMOS is that we have a lot of young people. The organization is growing very fast. The country is growing very fast too, in terms of its economics, its industries, its politics, and so on. Sila datang ke depan ni, jangan malu, banyak seat depan. So because of these reasons, we have to have a more efficient and effective means of managing ourselves. Now let us mention our specialty, which is information technology and microelectronics. These are the fastest moving technologies that man has ever known. We must be able to manage these technologies so that they become beneficial to us. As always, we understand technology to have two sides to the sword. It cuts both ways. If we use technology well, it cuts to our advantage. If we do not use technology well, it will cut ourselves. So this is why we have to have also a very strong foundation in managing technology. So I'm saying that what we have as this program is not independent, not isolated from our everyday concerns. It is very much the basis for what we are trying to do. So that is my introduction to the subject. So I will now try to introduce the speaker. Professor Anis is a renowned scholar who is now at the International Islamic University. He will be leaving us soon to go back to Islamabad, although we would like him to stay here longer, but that is the circumstance. His specialty, as I said, is comparative religion, but among his interests, I see from the list, is communication and da'wah. So if you say communication, immediately information technology comes in. So he has a very great interest in what we do here, and I believe that he will be able to explain from the Islamic conception a lot of things about management and about managing information technology. So with that quick introduction, may I invite Professor Anis to proceed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala khatimil anbiya. Honorable Brother Tanko, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's a unique honor for me to meet you this morning and share very humbly in some of the preliminary ideas which I have on this topic given to me regarding a dynamic Islamic approach to organization. As Brother mentioned just now, we are living in an age of communication, and communication is not a one-way process, it is a two-way process, and I don't want to have a monologue. Therefore, I'll appreciate from the beginning, without waiting for my talk to be over, if you kindly interrupt me in the middle, raise your observations, comments, questions, so we can have a more meaningful interaction. When we talk about Islamic approach to management, we should first try to understand what we mean by Islam as such. And for that, I would like to share with you very briefly in some of the information. Islam is more than a set of belief and ritual. Unfortunately, in most of our countries all over the world, Islam has been taken as a matter of ritual, belief, and certain practices. Therefore, a person who regularly visits masjid to make prayer, someone who goes out to make hajj, someone who gives some money in charity, defines himself or herself as religious person. But same person, when on the job or dealing with human beings or performing an activity, feels differently. The same individual who in the masjid was saying, Allah, you are the greatest, when it comes to money matters, says, dollar, you are the greatest. Therefore, we have lived in a world where Islam has been confined to ritual and worship, but has not been integrated or looked into from a larger perspective. Islam actually stands for an integrated way of life, where the Aqidah travels into our personality, into our conduct and behavior, in everything we do conceivable. Therefore, it does not differentiate between the material and spiritual. The biggest dilemma of not only Christianity, but many religions was that they always separated the world of spirit and the world of matter. Consequently, they had a very nice ethics, which was at personal level. But when you were dealing with collective issues, it was a completely different set of values. The uniqueness of Islam lies in this aspect. And for that, I will refer you to this Quranic ayah, where in Surah Al-Jum'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, O you who are believers, when the call for prayer is made, then you should rush towards the masjid. To do what? To do dhikr. And I'm sure all of you know better than me, when we use this term dhikr, what comes to your mind is a rosary on which you are counting how many times you have favored Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by calling His name. How many times you have saved yourself by saying, please forgive me. That's what we think. But here, the Quran says, rush towards the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and close all your transactions. But as soon as you have finished it, what should you do? You go back and spread yourselves inland. And while you are there, you should seek fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that you become more productive, you become more involved, you become more concerned about excellence. And while you are doing it, again the same term is used, but you do it with dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that's where Islam liberates dhikr from rosary, from masjid. For many people, the ideal situation is when they go and confine themselves to masjid, remember Allah. When they come to the assembly line, doesn't matter God exists or does not exist. Then they are just an assembly line following the time schedule where they should be on assembly line for so many hours, have a break, and then come back again. No God, no ethics enters there. But here the Quran integrates and says, you come for dhikr in the masjid, then carry dhikr with you in marketplace, in factory, in your office, in your university, in your assembly line. And while you are doing it, you increase it further. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. Here it is just dhikr of Allah, but here kathiran, much more. Which means that it's a total integration, a new approach in life, that you cannot just be a good Muslim in masjid and just a manager in office or just a stock broker in stock exchange. But wherever you are, you have to carry this aspect with you. This aspect is further reinforced when we come to some other Islamic principles, and we find here that the Quran, in view of this new approach, makes the managers responsible for a total quality improvement. And for that, we find the Quran telling us, those who believe in Allah and the last day, they enjoin what is right and forbid from what is good, and they hasten in doing what is better, superior, what is going to be excellent. Khairat is not a matter of charity. Khairat is a matter of what is superior, what is better, what is excellent. Therefore, when the Quran talks about doing khairat, then it's telling us you need to excel in doing whatever is your area of work. If someone is an engineer and a mediocre engineer, Islam is very much unhappy. Islam wants khairat. So you are able to give more. When you are an educationist and a mediocre educationist, Islam very unhappy with you. Islam wants to see that you are excelling, achieving your targets and going for high targets. Similarly, Islam makes it an obligation on the part of managers and people in authority that they need to play an active role in keeping society ethical, moral, dynamic and active. So the Quran says, if we give them authority, then they don't just keep Friday for worship and all days for shaitan. But what they do, they come forward and establish a system which is based on zakah and virtue. And they enjoin virtue. They don't take virtue as something personal, individual. In Islamic approach of life, worship, doing good deeds is not a matter of my personal preference. I may pray, I may not pray. I may do something, may not do something, but it's personal. No. Islam does not believe in that. Therefore, people in authority, the managers, the officers, the rulers, they are required by Quran to disseminate Islamic values. They must enjoin people to do good, and they must stop people from exploitation, oppression, injustice, inequity, creating imbalances in society. This leads Islam to a culture of collectivity, cohesiveness, or what we call jama'ah. Islam, with this approach, requires that we create a culture of unity and cohesiveness. Therefore, we find here the Quran telling us that you need to be cohesive. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. I'm sure you have heard this ayah 10,000 times. But when you look around, you find Muslims are the most disunited person. And that must put a question mark in your mind. What's wrong with us? Well, something is definitely wrong with us. But right now, let's see how Islam wants to proceed. From this approach of Islamic cohesiveness in life, it wants to create a culture of jama'ah, a culture where you are one unity. And without that culture of jama'ah, you cannot have a sense of direction. You cannot have a sense of objective and target. So these are linked together. Unless these aspects, a conduct of ethical behavior and excellence. And there you find again the Quran guiding us that we have to create with this unity and jama'ah a common approach in life. When the Quran says from you there should emerge a group, then it's referring to an organized effort. Ummah is essentially a Quranic term which refers to organization. When the Quran says that there should be a group from you, it's referring to a group which may consist of 2 persons or more, as we define in most of the organizational literature. So here it also injects the idea that not only a group of 2 persons, but with a mission and objective and target. The purpose which brings them together is that they are going to enjoin what is ethical, moral and good, and they are going to stop people from what is unethical, frustrate them from doing things which are not suitable for humanity. And once it is done, then you are going to get rid of disunity, which means Islamic approach is essentially positive and constructive based on ethical virtues, which by itself eliminates tafraqa, disunity and mutual conflict. Consequently, we come to the next aspect of discussion. With this introduction, we usually define organization as working of 2 or more individuals together in a structured way for a specific objective and target. We find that organizations usually accomplish things which cannot be achieved by individuals. We also find they provide us services like they provide education, they provide technical help, and they provide necessities of life. But at the same time, organizations could also play a negative role. And those may cause some kind of disruption in society. Therefore, you have even organizations which move around certain immoral concepts. Drug trafficking is done by an organized effort. It's not just individual. Now, in view of that, Islam wants to create an organizational culture which consists of certain definition of goals, targets, strategies, and programs. And there we find that goals or targets which may be short term, which may be long term, do provide what at a given time is to be done with a decisive effort on the part of members of organization. Similarly, we find that Islamic organizational culture suggests certain strategies or steps to be taken in different situations to achieve their goals. And then it provides programs which have to be followed in order to create a better organization. In that, we find that Islamic approach emphasizes a lot on the process of decision making, where I would like to share with you briefly on this outline. Islamic decision making is usually understood in terms of Islamic concept of shura. And therefore, one important aspect that needs to be emphasized and underscored is that a proper decision-making process is where we find a participatory process. Shura is essentially participatory organization. So, in Surah Ashura, 42nd chapter of the Quran, ayah number 38, we find the Quran saying, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Your matters, not only big matters, but every decisive issue is to be discussed. And you know, in modern management, there is a remarkable shift from the establishment to the worker. Today, those who are experts in organization don't talk about just structure, but they talk about man in the structure. Unless you have involvement of the person in the structure becomes meaningless, lifeless, and sterile. Therefore, the Quran refers and emphasizes on this participatory organization. And then it comes and emphasizes same approach with a shift. What is to be done after that? So in Surah Al-Imran, it talks about that you are enjoined to do consultation and shura. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Which means that consultation must be followed by execution, implementation, translation. You cannot just have a group and discuss and then disperse. No, you must agree on certain issues. And when you agree on those issues, then Islam assumes that you have a birthright to disagree. Therefore, shura is not a matter of bringing in people to agree with you, but it's a matter of looking into both sides of the coin, how a decision will affect you and your organization, your members of organization, their family life, their individual benefits, when we discuss all these aspects, then we are doing shura. Consequently, it provides a kind of security and protection for those who are involved in decision making. Secondly, it also protects them against and maybe not fully informed majority. In some situations, when you have to discuss a matter, you find a large number of people saying, well, we must do it. And you will find that quite often political decisions are made in such organizations based on how many people will favor it and appreciate it. Shura is a principle which tells us, although you may have a majority of people voicing a view, but you bring them in and discuss and forget about quantitativeness, but look for qualitativeness. Interact, and ultimately, when you have something based on reason, based on analysis, then even those who were not fully aware may join you in same. Therefore, the shift is here. Faiza Azam, that you have to reach a consensus. And once you reach that, then you leave it to Allah. Then don't say, well, majority was thinking it is not good. If you were not happy, if you were not supporting it. No, once you agree as an organization, as a group, then each one has to take responsibility. Then each one has to stand for it. Each one has to make sure decisions are implemented. That's what makes Islamic organizational approach dynamic. Because here you have not just passive recipients of information. Information flow, if it is one directional, can never bring dynamism and change. Then you are always on the receiving end. But shura means you have an ongoing interaction. And with this interaction, you come up with a consensus and understanding of how things are to be done. Second thing I want to share with you is that Islamic organizational approach differs from other approaches essentially on our emphasis on values. Islamic approach is essentially a matter of values. In many other approaches, you will find there is a concern about productivity, concern about your system as such. But here, the approach is that you should somehow bring an integrated vision of life. And that begins with first important Islamic principle, namely that of Tawheed. Tawheed has been often understood as a matter of belief or theology. But Tawheed is much more than that. It brings a unity in life, unity in thought, unity in action, unity in vision, unity in your programs and strategies. And all these move around the ultimate objective of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we have a higher objective and goal of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, consequently we all join together in that effort, and then we do not take individual positions. We do not become just individuals who are put in an organization, but we become a totality. We move towards one and same objective. So first important difference we have is that of value in the form of Tawheed. Second is, Islam is not for mathematical equality, but it is for justice. Therefore, it's not necessary that everyone gets equally what others are getting, but everyone must get what one deserves. And therefore, the principle is adl wal ihsan. Adl is not equality, but adl is equity, justice. Justice should prevail over the quantitative notion which exists in the Western managerial and organizational philosophy. Therefore, you may have to think of compensation for person in view of his contribution, not just in view of quantitativeness. It's based on quality, and quality must be improved and recognized. So Islamic value and principle is that of adl and not that of blind equality. Since all people are there, they must have same. Similarly, it's based on another important ethical value, and that is cooperation and collaboration. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. That's what the Quran says here, that you have to be cooperative in matters, which means if an organization is based on ethical values of brotherhood, tawheed, adl, then you have no choice but to participate from the depth of your heart and not to count your time. I see quite often in my university a number of workers, as soon as it is 4:15 or 4:10, they feel very much uneasy, as if something much more important has come on their mind, and that is taking a break. Or in the so-called coffee hour or tea break, I find that even if a person has not done his job or her job, this prevails over job. And the person feels, well, this is my time, personal time, I should take it off, and after that I can do my job. Islamic approach is very much different. It is of your total involvement for total quality. You cannot have these two ends meet without your total involvement. It's only when a person forgets about his individuality and personal needs when he is able to work in a group. I'm not saying that Islam does not recognize individual existence, but Islam wants to see an individual participating with the spirit of cooperation in all those areas which are needed for a meaningful and dynamic organizational structure. Next, we find that Islamic organizational approach takes into account the element of nasiha, which means that you are not just people who are robots who have to just operate, but every single member of an organization has an obligation to advise and counsel. If you are an expert in a micro area and your supervisor is not an expert in that area, it's your obligation according to Quran and Sunnah that you should advise and tell, sir, according to my information and knowledge, if we take this step, it might create following problems. And you need not worry at all that you are going to offend the person because he is your officer. That requires understanding and application of Islamic principles operationally. We read the Quran for blessing, never to look into it. Does it provide us something for practical life? While the Quran claims from the day one, I am Hidayah, I am guidance for every single situation. But we look on it with extreme respect, reverence, awesomeness, just to read a portion to get a blessing. Not more than that. Islam wants us to go beyond that approach and look into the Quranic instructions So it's a culture where you have to come forward and make your contribution. Similarly, it talks about ma'ruf here, which is not only advice, but which is individual and collective good. Ma'ruf is not just advice, it's much more than that. So one should look for the individual as well as collective good. If I want to summarize what we have discussed just now, the Islamic organization has certain objectives. And these objectives are not confined to organizational structures, but these objectives have been provided by Islam as universal objectives for any organization. A state is an organization. University is an organization. Proton Saga is an organization. Wherever you are, you need to take care of these 5 aspects. Therefore, these 5 aspects are universal objectives which we translate by one single term, Sharia. Unfortunately, Sharia has been understood in this country and other countries where Muslims live as a matter of rigid law, punishments, horrible punishments, not just punishments, and that's what people think Sharia is. No, Sharia is essentially concerned with these 5 things. First objective is to have a meaningful Islamic organization. You must serve for protection of human life and encourage human life. Information systems, organizational structures, if they do not help in preservation, protection, security of human life, are meaningless. Then these are not Islamic objectives, and consequently the organization is not Islamic. Islamic does not mean that organization should have a chief with a very long beard. Does not mean he should always wear baju malayo. Does not mean he should always lead the prayer. No. It means when you have these objectives in the organization, if you are serving these objectives, then your organization is Islamic, although it may be run by Michael Jackson. Doesn't make difference. If you have these objectives, then it is Islamic because it is serving. These are universal. These are not for Muslims. These objectives are for Muslims, non-Muslims, those who believe in Allah and don't believe in Allah. Islam does not say that life of a non-Muslim should be killed and life of a Muslim to be preserved. The principle is you must preserve life, even of an animal or a biological structure. So it's not a matter of just confining it to Muslims, but these principles and objectives have a universal application. Secondly, any organization must encourage and protect intellect and human reason. If you have information systems which create disrespect for reason, which create a kind of hypnosis, and you are unable to act rationally, then you have a problem there, and that must be corrected. In that respect, I will say even our media policy is to be based on, is it serving human reason and intellect, or is it causing a kind of transformation of behavior and conduct, making it more violent, more tilted toward drug addiction, or is it encouraging use of human reason when you watch a drama, when you read a news item, is it serving the purpose of providing centrality to human reason and intellect, or it is creating agnosticism, doubt, disrespect for knowledge, disrespect for tradition and culture, for everything? Thirdly, it should have an ideal of honoring human dignity, which means that anyone, whether a Muslim or non-Muslim, deserves to be respected and deserves to be honored, and you cannot allow immorality to be conducted by non-Muslims or Muslims. It's something universal. You go and ask the most ancient Chinese thinkers and philosophers and say, how about if we allow some people to commit adultery? Is it okay? No. Are you Muslims? No. Why you say? Because this is human. Therefore, the objective of organization is to protect and safeguard human dignity and honor that must be maintained. Similarly, property. If an organization is not allowing people to have what they own, endangers it, then it is not observing Islamic principle. And lastly, the matter of religious liberty. Islamic principles provide differences of opinions within the mazhab and differences of approaches outside the mazhab. Therefore, Islamic approach is not of having either one fiqh for all Muslims nor one religion for all humanity. It allows this religious liberty at these two different levels. And if an organization insists, then it cannot be regarded as Islamic organization. Which means that not because a country has some non-Muslims, but even a country where you have no non-Muslims, you must provide religious liberty. You must stand for it. And when you find some other country exploiting religious rights of people, it's the responsibility of Muslim organization, whether state, whether private sector, whatever you call it, that they should come forward and stand for the rights of people wherever they are. Because we are not a group who are sectarian, not a group who are parochial, not a group who are confined to one single approach, but Islam is for the whole of humanity. So these objectives of any organizational structure in Islam provide the basis for something to be called Islamic or un-Islamic. I think I'm running short of time, and I will just mention very quickly that second aspect after the consultative structure for me in an organization is its leadership. You cannot have a dynamic approach in Islamic organization without having a dynamic leadership. And for that we find the Quran telling us that leadership requires a person who is really capable. You cannot have a person because he is coming from a princely family, coming from a very affluent background, but you need a person who is capable. So Islam cuts across and destroys for once and for all any kinds of favoritisms and any kinds of injustices. So it says that you should give authorities to people who are capable enough. And tu'addul amanat ila ahliha, those who really deserve to have it. Capability is the first. Second, they have to be decisive. We discussed earlier with reference to shura that you have to make a decision. Azmul umur. And that is the basis for what I have put here. Thirdly, that they have to be extremely honest. And they have to be persons who have the strength to implement. So in this ayah from Surah Al-Qasas, we find two things identified. Qawiyun Amin, a person who is honest, and a person who has authority to implement. You cannot have any leadership without authority, without trust, without honesty. These are the elements of any dynamic leadership in Islam. You must have a communicative personality. You find sometimes leadership is very much introvert, may never communicate. I understand best communication is not by your memos, notices, announcements, but by just walking on two legs. If a person just walks on two legs, then that is the best communicability. And in modern organizational literature, you find emphasis that leadership must have a person-to-person contact, which means using legs, not using just memos, which you write and send. Well, this morning you were so many minutes late, a memo received. Well, that may be required because you have to put things in personal file and so on and so forth. But best communication is when you just walk on two legs and just sit with the brother and say, maybe something happened this morning. I hope everything is okay. That's enough. Next time, you will never face this problem. And last thing which I want to share with you is, when we talk about leadership, then we need to bring leadership which is involved. And for that, I want to share with you in my analysis of what I call Al-Ahzab model. And I have not been able to find it in a number of books that deal with even Islamic approach of organization. Buraiz or our brother Nasir or anyone else, they have not been able to bring this dimension in their writings. The reason I bring it is because in organizational structures, you need leadership which is involved. You need leadership which is fully aware of needs of the organization and its members. You need leadership which is providing a unified approach and not a split approach. A unified approach is where you are presenting what you want to see in organization by your own conduct and behavior. A split approach is where you talk about high ideals, but you are not presenting yourself that model. In Ahzab model, what happens, Muslims are attacked by people from all over Arabia. It's 5th year of Hijrah. And Prophet finds a very difficult situation. How should he handle the whole of Arabia against him? He goes through that process we discussed a while ago. He calls for Shura, participatory organization. And when you have Shura, then you don't sit as head of state who knows everything, but you sit as a person who wants to hear from others and look for differences of opinion. And you don't look even for the majority view always. In Ahzab model, we find that only one companion, Salman from Persia, he stood up and said, well, in such situations in our country, what we do, we first defend ourselves, then we fight with our enemy. And for defense, what we do usually is, surrounding the city, we make a ditch and fill it with water, so enemy cannot enter into our city. It was something unknown to the Arabian or the known culture at that time. Arabs never used it before. If Prophet was like us, many of the managers, he will say, I never saw it in Japan, never saw it in Korea, how can I do it? No, since he found that the suggestion and proposal is viable, has logic, can work, nothing wrong in trying. Now if he was like us, he will issue a proclamation. I want my 500 soldiers to pick up shovels and go around the city and dig a ditch around the city and complete the task within 5 days, and signed. So what he did was, following the basics of organizational structure, a dynamic structure, he called the companions and made a group of 10 each. Then he went on the spot and decided so many footage to be given to one group, which means you are identifying your human resources, you are identifying your targets, you are telling them how long, how wide, how deep. A task is defined. You can give a task in an organization, but undefined, you will get haphazard results. But when you give a clear instruction with a defined objective, you get a job finished and accomplished properly. So he defined the area and told these are the 10 persons responsible for it with this kind of time frame. So each one has to complete this target. After doing it, he could call for a press conference and come ceremonially and with a golden shovel touch the soil and go back to his luxurious air-conditioned bedroom. He never did it. What he did was, he took a shovel in his hand and joined them, sharing in the experience, providing the model that if I ask you to work hard, I work hard too. And when he did it, and he did it with them to the extent that when they faced a very hard piece of rock, which they could not break themselves, and came to him and said, Sir, we are in a problem. A hard piece of rock which we cannot break. Okay, let me try. He goes there with a shovel and cracks on it, and it cracks. Which means that he is not running away from hard work himself, but he is himself soiling his hands with dust, sweating himself, tiring himself, doing anything he can do. And consequently you find that when this thing continues for several days, then some companions come and say, Sir, we have been working so hard day and night. We did not take even our, if I use the words, tea break, coffee breaks. We did not take any hamburgers, cheeseburgers, chicken burgers. We are hungry, and some of us had to tie stones on our stomach to give a feeling that we are not so much hungry. And one of the companions showed him, I'm carrying 2 small stones tied on my stomach. Then this leader just lifted his shirt and showed them he was carrying 3 stones, not 2. Now that's where you have motivation. We talk a lot about motivation, but motivation is not by lectures, by transparencies as you are saying, by nice values to be talked about, but it is by way of a model leadership which is able to provide a participatory feeling, a feeling that he also knows the pinch of hunger, and he knows the pinch of hunger more than his followers. When this is what you present, then you can never fail in changing the world. You can never fail in bringing revolution. You can never fail achieving your targets. The secret of Islamic leadership and change was that this motivation, communicativeness, participation, decision making, all was within the group, organization. It was not being imposed from a executive office, but it was shared. So when you have shared and participatory leadership and approach, you are bound to motivate. No other way. And no one, when he finds the leader himself in that situation, can sit back and say, well, let him do the job. I'll just go at the end and get snapped by the photographers with a nice frame in newspapers appearing a task has been achieved. No one can do that. An ordinary worker will feel compelled to go and participate when you find this kind of situation. Lastly, just the opposite of what we want to see in Islamic approach is when we develop a centralization approach in organization. Centralization approach, in my humble view, is like an acid which eats up organizations without the organization having a knowledge about it. And therefore you have a different model of leadership where you find in model A, X knows everything, you know nothing. Where you find that boss is always right. There is only one way to do things, and that is his way. Where you find that X must win every battle. You are always in a battle. When you take a proposal, first thing is to begin with no. Now you convince. And boss must win that. You cannot win. Fourth is when you find that he looks for faults in everyone except himself. So you treat your members of organization as if they are the cause for everything. Fault is there, never in your office or in your approach. This is a negative approach of organization. It does not work in an Islamic atmosphere because Islam is essentially a positive, constructive, more human model based on the individual as well as society. It's not a model where you find authoritarianism, centralization, but a matter of sharing in information, and that's what makes an organization Islamic and dynamic. I'm sorry for taking so much time. I don't take that long normally. I talk at the most 20-25 minutes and then leave time for interaction, but since I worked a bit on these transparencies, I thought I share with you this information. So may Allah bless you all, and I'm available for any disagreements, comments which you may have. Please begin with disagreements first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. Although he invited us to chip in at any time during the talk, I think it was going like a fast train. And we were just sitting in the train enjoying the journey. So that didn't give us much time to stop the discussion. I think it was a very good talk. I must have many agreements to make, not disagreements. Of course, many questions to raise. But I should not start it. I think it's ready for the audience, for you, to bring up your own apprehensions, your own theories, to what all this means. And I think the ultimate theme that you should really focus on is what really is a manager and what really is leadership. Because both are embedded very strongly in the talk. They're both embedded strongly in the talk, and if we understood this very well, then I think we have no problem in reforming our country. So, can we have first comment, question? Please agree. Agree.
Please.
Why doesn't it work nowadays?
Why?
Why doesn't all the... I agree with all the people
Yeah.
it work.
Yeah, you see, I think the key lies in the last statement I made. We always develop an approach of finding fault in others and never look critically inside. The Islamic principle for that is what we call hisab, ihtisab, hisba. Three terms that are rooted in the Quran and which tell us that everyone has to account for himself, everyone has to develop an approach of critical analysis. Now I think that's where organizations need to develop a culture of ihtisab and not of picking on others. There's difference between the two. You can pick up on anyone and publicly insult a person, annoy, alienate, frustrate. You could at the same time do ihtisab by observing Islamic mannerism and win the person, oblige the person, and involve the person. Now, we have not been doing it in most of our organizations. Perhaps I can refer to the historical model where you find the khulafa applying it in the best possible way. But as soon as the period of khilafah is over, you find the Umayyads rulers applying this approach of what the ruler knows, no one knows. What no one can question, no one can suggest. They are just an autocratic structure. So wherever we have this shift, we'll have problems. I think you cannot think of a single Muslim country where you have liberty, freedom, you have room for public criticism on the ruling group. Nowhere in the Muslim world. While you find that in some of the Western countries, you can even bring personal lives of people publicly and take to law courts. Which means something wrong with us. And what's wrong with us is we look for faults with the other and never present ourselves for evaluation. This is one thing, definitely. The other is that we have also been unable to relate our Islam with our actual life. It has become a kind of stereotype with us. For centuries, we have separated our Islam from our personal, political, social, economic life. We have a different set of values. What is regarded as honesty by a family is not same honesty in marketplace. A person may not cheat his wife and children, but a person in business may often cheat his clients. Which means we have two sets of values. Islam wanted us to apply same honesty which we practice with our family, in our commerce, in our political matters, in our international affairs. But unfortunately we are not doing it, and the reason is this separation. We have reduced Islam to a ritual, to a worship, and we don't allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enter the realm of politics and economy. We say you are good for masjid. We can come and submit to you in masjid, but don't come out of it and tell us what you do in the economy. Never come out of masjid, tell us what you do in political science. No, you better stay in masjid. Now that's our approach, unfortunately, for centuries. So unless we change this approach, We cannot revolutionize society. Islam is for social change, not for just worship and prayer. For that there are angels. And they said it. When man was created, they said, "Sir, we are already worshipping you, serving you. Why you need troublemaker?" Allah said, "I know troublemaker because I'm his engineer. I know what he can do. You cannot create that situation in this world which this troublemaker can do." Consequently, human beings were created. So I think we have not been able to look on Islam in a constructive, positive manner, and we have not been able to take an approach of self-criticism, evaluation, trying to find out what's wrong with us. For one example I give you, in my country, whenever there is a problem, the blame goes on either Americans or Israelis. Then what are you doing, 128 million people? Pakistan is 128 million people. If White House can move everything for you, where are you? Where is your brain? Now, this is the psychology of Muslims. Wherever something happens, we just put blame. It's White House, it's Beijing, it's Tokyo, they are doing it. But where are you? So I think we need to change this approach. Unless we change it, we cannot improve. Any other?
Yes. Go on.
Please.
So instead, we also believe in surah or the collective of religion, right? So, but the actual surah that's been adopted by Rasulullah, I think that is not very. I mean, we still not believe in that. So that's why when we have a surah, so it's still not really effective in terms of decision making. So how we could get the best or the best result from this one?
You see, first of all, we should know that Shura in the Quran provides us principles. Shura in the Sunnah provides us a translation of those principles in a human context. Shura by the companions provides an application of both in given situations. It has three levels of understanding. While Shura in the Quran tells us in brief, you should have interaction, participation, look for alternatives. Shura is a matter of alternatives, not a matter of just forcing people to agree on something, but we look for alternatives. The application is by the Prophet, where you find many examples, such as the selection of the site for Badr. When first battle takes place, he asks his companions, should we have this place as our station? And they say, no sir, we better go to that place because that place is near water, it's not a low area, even if it rains we will not have problems there. So they give justification, and after consultation he agrees on that, which means say for example of Uhud, his own view was that we should not go out and fight but stay in Medina. Companions came and said, well, we think we should go out and fight, and he agreed with them, which means Shura is not preconceived decisions to be communicated diplomatically, but Shura is a matter of when you go with an open approach, open system approach, and bring interaction and then choose what is the best option. Unfortunately, many Muslims think they can outsmart others by following certain techniques and methods. When we are not sincere in it, we can never have Shura. with a mockery.
So that's why, because we are human, you see.
Yes.
So human with a different ideology, and the worst is that they have the alter ego. They have ego, the status ego. So that's why no, my opinion is right. Yours is not. So let's say this kind of conflict that the surah won't work. If let's say my opinion is that if under one organization that really knows about Islam, for instance, so it should be okay. I mean, we will try to surah, so they will understand what the surah is. For instance, like the Khandaq war. So the leadership, for instance, like Rasulullah, will also goes to the at the ground level, dig the ditch. So this kind of thing in our modern modern organization. So the officer, for instance, they won't work with the ground level because they thought they will show the status. So they want to make the cap that I'm the officer, you are not, something like that. So what's your comment?
Well, I fully agree with you that these weaknesses need to be corrected, and we need to bridge this gap. We need to bring this participatory approach where the head of organization and the ordinary worker both feel that there is no distance, there is no problem of status consciousness, but it's a matter of our human effort. We have to do it jointly. We must have feeling of a family organization. Family is an organization, no different than an organization. And if you look into the sociological literature, they define family as an organization. They never say it's just a structure. It's an organization which has certain values, certain norms, certain leadership, interaction. And you will have families where there is no shura at all. And families where things are done by consultation, by persuasion, not by authority and force. So I think the principle of shura filters down to every single level of organization, not only organizations which are in specialized areas like information technology, but even family, even masjid. You see, masjid presents an example of shura. When you want to appoint someone as leader, you discuss with people, find out who knows better about Islam, and when there are 10 options, after comparing 10 options, you come for the best one. So it has to be applied in every single area. The problem is that we have left discussions on shura for the ustaz, and we think that we go for Western experts who have published books on organization, and based on that, when we have discussion, then we're dealing with organizational matters. I think we need to bring our Islamic terminologies in our everyday discussion and have this practically established. Even if a small body in Malaysia is able to apply it, you will see a remarkable difference in your output, and others will be persuaded to follow. We don't have to see everyone doing it, then we do it. No. Islam means you have to be pioneers. Islam means you should not be followers, but leaders. And for that, if two of you in this group are convinced we should have shura, then two of you start it. And you will see the whole group practicing shura. You don't have to wait for a directive to come from anywhere. It's a matter of good for the organization, and that should start from anywhere. So I think we should not wait for people from outside, a messiah, to come and save Muslims. No, Muslims have to do it themselves. Unless we take that approach, you can never improve. Any other from our sisters, please?
agree that the have the shura work, that means all the participants must be at least some not equal knowledge, some equal some knowledge about how things work.
Yeah, you see, shura is first a matter of sharing in information, which means that first those who are involved must be given access to information. Second is the matter of prioritization. Third is the matter of your looking for the targets and objectives you want to achieve. Fourth is a matter of coming up with a stock taking. What are the pros and cons of one alternative and the other? And that leads you to decision making. Now, this is not something unusual given by Islam. This is even common sense. So when we have people of different levels and we do not inform them and educate them, we can never involve them in shura. We can only have shura when we first provide information. Now this is the problem. These are different aspects of it. Now you look from your viewpoint, other one looks from his viewpoint or her viewpoint, and then we come to it. Now the problem is, as brother was saying, we are human beings. When we face such situations, and for some reason, a person who is not carrying a PhD, is not a university professor, a very simple person, raises his voice and says, well, I think this is a better option, and we all laugh at it. Next time, he's never going to speak up a single word. Shura means that we respect even the most stupid suggestion. Listen to it. That's why in the end I mentioned about a model where you know everything. You don't want to listen to anyone. Before someone starts talking, you say, okay, so, finished. No, that's not. First you should listen. Communication is essentially a matter of listening, not a matter of talking. If you don't listen, you cannot communicate. Some people appear very passive. I think they are very good communicators. If you can just listen to a person patiently, you have communicated. But because of our human nature, we develop certain attitudes, and that discourages culture of shura. In most of Muslim societies, I do not see culture of shura. It is mostly an authoritarian model, tribal model, which exists in most of Muslim societies. And that's because we have gone far away from Islam. We have become nationalist, regionalist, ethnic-oriented, language-oriented people. And we have forgotten we are one single ummah. So our distance from Islam has brought all these alien aspects to us, which we see as our local cultures in Pakistan and elsewhere. So we have to do hard work for quite some time. And only then we can change Muslim ummah. Any other? Please.
One aspect, we were talking about management. One aspect of management would be on reward and punishment.
Yes.
The Muslim
Yes.
But I believe today's management organization are very much influenced by the Western culture of
Yes.
reward.
Yes.
Can I get your comment on how reward and punishment should be handled within a Muslim or Islamic organization?
A number of educationists, mostly Western, they have serious objections on reward and punishment. They say if you give your child candy when he has done something good, you make him a very selfish person, who becomes convinced that I should always get a reward for anything I'm doing. I disagree with them. And the reason is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says He is going to reward and punish. And He knew psychology better than us. He knows human beings better than educationists. If He is saying, I'm going to give you a reward in Jannah and in Jahannam and in this world, and who are we to go against it? So I believe there has to be a use of reward and punishment which should be proportionate to the task achieved. I do not believe that we should just talk about very high ethical values and have no concept of reward and punishment. Now that can take different forms. You don't always reward a person by paying him in ringgit, by declaring him man of the year. But you have many other ways of reward and punishment which should be observed and which are more educative, persuasive, which make a person more dynamic. Like responsibilities. If you give a person more responsibility, then the person is rewarded. If you provide in an organization ongoing evaluation that we have now, like point system you have in many places, you have earned so many points. Now you are not paying cash, but you have earned certain points, which gives you a feeling that, well, I did something better than others, and also persuades others to compete. Hadith says that you should allow competition in khairat, musabiqa fil khairat, which means that in doing good things, in excelling over another, there should be opportunity available, and that is to be compensated and rewarded, because it's not a matter of just saying everything is okay the way you do it. No, those who have done better needs to be recognized. Even sometimes a personal note, a visit, a verbal declaration in presence of others that we have brothers and sisters who have been able to accomplish following things, and we appreciate. I think shukr is Islamic category, and shukr is for both, not just for the person who has done, but also when you are doing something you should feel thankful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was able to allow you to do it. So not just that you should get shukr and appreciation from your seniors, because you are doing it just for them. Allah gave you opportunity, you thank. You did good work for organization, they thank you. So we should have a culture of shukr and reward together. And quite often you will find that a nice word of thanks from the depth of your heart is much more valuable than a golden certificate framed in silver frame given to someone. A simple appreciation which is reflected from your gestures and your feelings. So I think I'm very much in favor of rewards and punishments in any Islamic organization. Otherwise we are unjust. Islam is adl, and adl means those who deserve should get it. Is that clear?
Only problem I have is how to prevail justice. Allah, in which case, is ultimate justice.
Sure.
Which is no question. When it comes to humans, how do one judge one has done justice?
Well, I mentioned a point in my discussion that when you are deciding matters and you decide something and you are wrong, you still get one reward. if you are right, to reverse. This is the Islamic principle, which means you do your best at your end. Be as objective as possible. After that objectivity, if you feel X must be rewarded more than Y, go ahead with it. The most harmful thing is undecisiveness. If you decide, no problem. Even if you have a wrong decision, perfectly okay. This is the hadith which says very clearly, when you make an ijtihad and you make a wrong ijtihad with all sincerity, you will still deserve a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason is Islam does not want us to develop absenteeism or abstentionism, which you find at every level. In the parliament, in the organization, in any place, there are some who are neither positive nor negative. Undecided. The reason is they want to be on both sides. Islam does not encourage that. Islam says you have to take a very clear, after you have thought, analyzed, just take a position. You may be wrong, nothing wrong in that. So when you want to reward people and you make a human error, perfectly okay. Please.
This one in Tasawwuf, they, that's what Islam normally says, do moderate. Moderate in terms of, let's say, working, whatever. So in this case, in terms of working, especially on R&D, so normally people start thinking from 8 o'clock up to maybe at night, whereas Allah has created days and nights, days for working time, nights for relaxation and things like that. So this working the moderate will unmotivate people to come into work hard.
I think very good observation and question which has two aspects. Firstly, should we define night and day in terms of geographic phenomena? If this is so, geographically there are areas where you have prolonged night and prolonged day. They should never have any work done for so long a period. Which means that if we become literalist and say, since the Quran says day for work and night for rest, therefore no night shifts in any factories, we'll be wrong. We'll be wrong, definitely. It simply means that your nafs has a haqq on you. And that haqq or right is that when you feel now you have done enough for the day, then you take a break. Okay? Now the Prophet ﷺ, the model he presented is not an 8-hour break for sleep. Not a 3-hour nap in the afternoon. It's the Quran which says that after a whole day of hard work, you are still standing and praying till your feet swell. Feet will not swell by standing for half an hour. Longer duration. And in the morning, he is not absent from Fajr because he has state. No. In the Fajr, he is leading the prayer, which means that after a very short nap, he is still energetic, working hard. Now, definitely, there is a need for moderation, and that's why you will find that Islam insists in the Quran that day has been made for work and night for your libas. Which means you take break and relax yourself. But at the same time, it depends on the situation where we are. I think if there are situations where we have gone down the drain for centuries, We have been on decline for centuries. We should never think of night, but a 24-hour day. I think Muslim Ummah has reached a level where it will be a crime for us to take that much rest which we are taking. If we analyze our lifespan, how many of the hours of our life are spent in simply sleeping, in simply sitting in front of a television set, watching a comedy or watching World Cup or whatnot. Just calculate yourself and you will find these are man hours which need to bring a change in Muslim Ummah, but which have been completely wasted, disregarded. I did some research on sleep when I was doing my comparative studies. I tried to compare concept of sleep in Hinduism, in Islam and elsewhere. And I found that sleep is not a matter of just measuring it in time duration, but it's a matter of entering into a state of relaxation and coming out of it. Therefore, you will find that although you may be in bed for 8 hours or 7 hours, the actual time which you use for relaxation is much more shorter. Rest of the time is when you are just lying down and wandering around. That's the time when you are always looking in dreams. You are in Johor Bahru or Switzerland or elsewhere and doing a number of things. But the actual time where you relax is where you have no dream and nothing. And that's very, very short. After that period, you are ready. Body is ready to work. You will not work. Something different. But your body has taken its due and share in that period. It depends on individual. If you can train yourself. I was sleeping maximum 4 hours for quite some time and I never had any problem. Health problem, drowsiness, sleepiness, nothing. You can train yourself, prepare yourself psychologically after you do some effort, and it will give you same productivity during daytime. Doesn't make difference. So I think I'm not saying that everyone should follow that example of just sleeping 4 hours, but I'm saying that one could very easily control that period in which you can fully rejuvenate and relax and come back on working hard. Muslim Ummah definitely needs much more time than what we are giving. If we study our daily schedule, the time we wake up till the time we go to bed, how many actual hours and how many man hours? You find that we are expected to work 8 hours. In those 8 hours, how many hours are really work? And how many are pretending to work? Big difference. And that should be very clear to us. Only then we can bring a change. You find some nations, the post-World War Germany, how they build themselves. The post-World War Japan, how they build themselves. Even today, if you compare the Japanese work hours, they say they are over-workaholic people, and their span of life has been influenced by it. Because it's a competition. How many more hours you can put in Japanese society? And that has led to serious psychological, physical problems for them. But leaving that aside for a while, the national psychology and approach was in both countries, we have to build. We lost everything. And they were able to erect themselves in a remarkable manner. Today, after the fall of Soviet Union, you find that the new emerging poles are either Germany or Japan or China. Analysis show that even Germany could be the biggest power after the US once they are able to penetrate in Europe as they are doing. And that's why they say that East-West Germany's unification was one strategy to regain that lost power. When people are doing all that, what are we doing? Gulf War, Yemen War, Sharia conflict in Malaysia. What are we doing? Is this the way of building a Muslim unity? Not at all. That means we have to look critically on our own conduct and behavior at political level, at organizational level, personal level, and only then we can prove that we are ummatan wasatan. Right now we are the most lazy ummah possible in the world.
Because we have a lot of responsibility. For instance, one day, it's not only for the working, okay? So we also have the amanah to our family,
Definitely.
amanah to our wife,
Definitely.
the child as well. So
Definitely.
that's why on the dot, maybe at the 5 on the dot, okay, it's right, that, because they amanah at the house as a leadership there. So that's the management also at the house, management also. So that's why we try to to equally divide office, house.
I fully agree with you, but I don't believe in equality. I believe in justice, which means that if you are doing justice to your work, you must do justice to your family as well. And you have ways of doing justice to them even when you are a bit away from them. There are ways of justice which will provide them equal care and concern, and that is Islamic obligation. It's not a matter of equality, it's a matter of justice, and they must get their due. So we should not be quantitative but qualitative in our approach. You have some observation, please?
I just want to thank you for the visit, and I want to ask, is there something called work for the dunya and work for the hereafter? But I try to encourage some people and they say, oh, the work for this is our work for the dunya. Therefore, we cannot increase it, that we are loving the dunya too much, then why? Can you please comment?
Well, the answer is from the Quran. The Quran says that you should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you good in this world and in life hereafter. And after every prayer we recite this dua, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana. If Islam was for the hasana in al-akhirah, you will have half dua only. The Quran should not say, give us hasana in this world as well as in life hereafter. Which means, whatever you are seeking in life hereafter is to be generated here in this world. Otherwise, you have no hasana in life hereafter. It is related together, proportionate. When you have more good work in this world, you have more good reward in life hereafter. So this is related and linked in a manner which cannot be separated. Our dilemma is, we have separated these two for centuries. We say, I am working for the akhirah by walking on my legs for 40 days to do some good. And in these 40 days, if my children are sick, if my wife has nothing to eat, if I have problems, doesn't matter. That's not Islam. Islam says you have to work here so you get there. You cannot just separate and say this is for the akhirah, this is for dunya. We have no such separation. My first point was, Islam does not separate between these two realms, which is the basis of Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism. You name any single religion and you find a bifurcation. Buddha left his princely life and went to the forest for 7 years in complete renunciation because he wanted to achieve spirituality. Islam condemns that. And the Quran says they have created ruhban for themselves, and this is not allowed. Ruhbaniya, monasticism, monkism is condemned. Because Islam says you have to work here. When you are working in your workplace, then it is ibadah. Does not mean no more prayer. No, definitely. That's obligation. This is over obligation. Both have to be done, but one not at the cost of the other. Both have to be balanced. What the brother said a while ago, that we need to bring moderation. This moderation is by way of working for al-akhirah more and more in the world. When we work more in the world, we have more al-akhirah. Not that we leave the world for shaitan and we ourselves retire in the masjid. So this is very good for shaitan, he will be very happy. You are collaborating with him, supporting him, helping him to create evil. No, we need to come and create a society which is based on virtue. So shaitan is eliminated. When we eliminate him, we create good in this world by material progress, development, and that brings development in life hereafter. So this is very closely linked together and not separated.